the Happy Scientist podcast. Each episode is designed to make you more focused, more productive, and more satisfied in the lab. You can find us online at bitesizebio.com/happy scientist. Your hosts are Kenneth Vogt, founder of the executive coaching firm Vera Claritas, and Dr. Nick Oswald, PhD, bioscientist, and founder of Bitesize Bio.
Hello, this is Nick Oswald welcoming you to this Bitesize Bio webinar, which today is a live episode of the Happy Scientist podcast. If you want to become a happier, healthier, and more productive scientist, you are in the right place. With me, as always, is the Bitesize Bio team's Mr. Miyagi. His name is Mr. Kenneth Vogt. In these sessions, we hear from Ken mostly on principles that will help shape you for a happier and a more successful career. And along the way, I'll pitch in with points from my personal experience as a scientist and from working with Ken myself. If you've got any questions, put them into the questions box on the right-hand side of your screen at any time, and I will put them to Ken. Today, we will be discussing patience and getting what you want. Are they compatible? Okay, that sounds a bit cryptic, Ken. What's going on there?
Well, I was thinking when I came up with this particular topic, I like to take a contrarian view because, patience seems like it should be a good thing, but could it actually hold you back? And, of course, the whole point of this podcast is to help you accelerate your career and help you get places and to help you to succeed. And yet we're talking about patience. So the first thing that comes to mind is, isn't patience supposed to be a virtue? I mean, how could this be bad for you? Because the fact is, you may find it desirable to be patient, and you may feel like you need it. There may be times when you feel like a lack of patience is causing you problems. But there's always this not opportunity, but this possibility that whenever you do something that you will overcorrect and then you take it too far. And that definitely happens for some folks when it comes to patience. They start just waiting for things to happen. They put things off. They don't stand up. They don't make any noise because, like, you know what? I'm just going to let this settle. I'm going to let this work itself out. And then they become passive. And in that passivity, things stop happening in some cases. So, that's the beginning point of this. So I will put the question to you, Nick. Have you ever found patience to get in your way before?
Well, I don't know. I've found passivity to get in the way before, and using patience as an excuse. I guess that's what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. And so the question is, how do we hang on to the valuable part of patience, but not use it as a crutch, or not pretend that we're being patient when actually all we're doing is being passive. So the flip side of this is that people don't like impatient people. And we sometimes we're being patient not because we want to be patient, but because we don't want to be perceived as being impatient. Because I mean that can go from being viewed as being annoying to being viewed as unbearable. And that's not good for your career. It's not going to be good for you if impatience is the label that gets attached to you. So how do we balance this out? How do we make sure that we're using patience when it makes sense, but we're not using patience as a crutch when it doesn't make sense? So one thing I would like to say about patience is a force. And I use that particular word on purpose. And we've probably talked about this before, the difference between a power and a force. And just in terms of physics, forces are something that is always limited and always opposed. So if you think of patience as something that is a force, then you realize there's always some kind of restriction. There's always some kind of opposition there. Now, the opposition is coming from you. If you're being patient, you're the one who is that opposing force because people on the receiving end of patience, they're not going to complain. Great, you're letting me do whatever I want. Awesome. So I'm not going to resist that, but you're going to resist that. And you may not even realize you're resisting it. You may not realize how it's costing you because it takes energy to be patient. And sometimes that is not a good investment of energy. Sometimes you need to go, no, not now, not this way, not this time. You got to stand up and recognize that patience is just being weak. And and that weakness is, I mean, it's weakening you. So you're expending energy, that's weakening you. You're losing face, that's weakening you. There's a lot of ways here that this can can start to pile up against you. Now, that's not to say that we should stop being patient, and I'm going to make the case for patience here in a little bit, but um, but I really want to call this out as: are you being mindful about your patience? Are you choosing, and are you choosing wisely when to be patient? I mean, there are times when we just let somebody have their way because they're just difficult to deal with, and they're just a constant problem. So we we offer that particular individual patience when, all things being equal, we wouldn't normally. We might not be willing to put up with that from somebody else, but because there's such a bull in the china shop, we just like, that's just not worth the fight, and so we give up on it. So what we have to do is be more aware of that stuff, and if we're dealing with somebody like that, and it could be our boss, um, we want to be looking for what are the opportunities to stand up, where I'm no longer just going to take the body blows, but I'm gonna put my foot down and say, look, this is a time when I have to take a stand, when I'm where I'm not gonna just let this happen. And you may find there are little things that are happening, where everybody's, I mean, I don't want to say everybody, but say many people are doing certain things that are annoying you and are costing you time and are impacting your access to resources or tools, and you just never say anything. That's not being patient. That's being walked on. um, if you could make it clear to people, like, hey, we have to leave this equipment set up for the next person to run. I'm tired of showing up at this piece of equipment and I got to reset it up every time because you guys left it a mess. And, and maybe it's one person, maybe it's multiple people, but those patterns get set up sometimes in your operation, and somebody sees somebody else doesn't do it, so they're like, why should I do it? And then it becomes this pattern where nobody does, until somebody stops being patient about that, puts their hand up and says, okay, no more. We can't do this anymore. We have to complete our tasks and clean up the mess afterwards so that the next person won't be hindered in what they're doing. And we've all had those situations where you're on a schedule, you got to get things done, and then you realize I have to do this preliminary work that I wasn't planning on because somebody else left a mess for me. When I say a mess, yeah, I mean that could be literally physically a mess, but just left things in a disordered way that don't allow you to just smoothly move forward. If there's a place for everything and everything is in its place, you can operate cleanly and carefully. And in the lab, um, I mean, there's so many times when literal cleanliness matters, when literal um, antiseptic uh, nature has to be there, that we don't often deal with outside of the lab. I mean, maybe you would do a little bit in your kitchen. Obviously, your kitchen, you want to keep it clean. You don't want to give the family food poisoning, but but I mean, you're dealing with tolerances that are much tighter. So I want to talk about that idea of tolerance, because when it comes to patience, the best you can hope for as a result of patience is tolerance and forbearance. That's when you're being patient, remember, as a force, it's coming at a cost to you. And so you can exhibit tolerance, you can exhibit forbearance. Now, tolerance is a useful concept in science. There are plenty of things that you're doing where the literal tolerances of measurements matter, and you have to be accurate within a certain degree. So you have a metaphor there for tolerance, but and you can see its usefulness, but you need to recognize that tolerance and acceptance are not the same thing. So, you may accept a plus or minus of 2% for something because that's acceptable. It works, right? Um, when it comes to being a numbers type thing. But when we're talking about the human relations part of this, there are some things that we just cannot accept. It's it's there is no, plus or minus 2% of annoyance, right? they can I will allow them to be this measurable amount of annoying and no more. It doesn't work like that because it's more subjective. So we need to be mindful about what will I tolerate and what won't I tolerate. How much interruption will I accept in a meeting? How much going you know off script will I allow in the lab? There, there's there's a there's a there's a limit there, and you have to decide where it is. You have to choose it because it's not going to be so easy as to say, well, the alarm will go off when it hits 5, whatever that means, right? Um, it isn't like that. You have to decide in any given moment, when is it really important that I don't accept things going awry. I have to keep things tight. And then there are other settings where it's not as critical. And part of that may happen too in an environment where you don't have full control. If it's not your meeting, if it's not your project, if you're on the team rather than leading the team, there may be different a different standard that you will choose to use. Um, but there are times when being a team member becomes oppressive to us because it's just so out of harmony with what we feel is is the most workable, or maybe it's just a project you're just not that into. It's just not. I mean, it's just work. It's just grunt labor to you, and you don't care that much. But there are other times when you really deeply care and it really matters to you that you want to be part of something, and you want it to function well. Or sometimes we want to be part of something to make sure it doesn't go wrong. You know, we want to be there to be the eyes and ears for the for whatever stand you're taking on that. And those are times when being patient is not really helping your cause. When you sign up to be part of something so that you can kind of be its watchdog, um, being patient isn't so much what you want to do. It's less valuable in that setting. Now there are other times when, yeah, you can be patient as patient as the day is long, as the saying goes. It's fine, but it comes down to choosing in any given moment, when am I willing to be tolerant of things? When am I willing to let things go? And when am I not? And when when it feels wrong, when I say wrong, I don't necessarily mean morally wrong, but it feels out of harmony with the objective that that you would like to see happen there, you need to stand up. And that is not the moment to be patient. So I will let you get in a word edgewise here before we go and
That's
talk
good.
the virtues of patience.
I was just thinking that I was going to tell everybody that this is the bit where you go a bit Yoda sometimes, and it's really good, but you have to really like drill down and decipher it sometimes. And actually, again, just to go back to that, if you've never done it, the first few episodes of this podcast help with some of the frameworks that you were using there. But to try and tease this apart a little bit, the way that I take what you're saying there is that patience versus impatience, if you want to look at it that way, it's not digital, right? It's analog,
Right.
and you don't want to be at one end or the other, and you want to find, you don't want to be overly patient, you don't want to be overly impatient, but you need to find the happy medium, and that depends on what the situation is. And would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would.
Was that a good
And
translation?
what we're about to get into is to really define patience and what's good about it. And this is what's going to help us choose when it's called for. So
Cool.
I'm going to put up that next slide.
Okay, the other way that I was
Go
looking at this before you jump into that, though, is that
Mhm.
the patience versus impatience is not the only continuum. It depends on what you put there.
Right.
It could be patience versus assertiveness. So in a situation where someone's behaving badly to you, you can be patient, or you can be assertive. You could be too patient or too assertive. But then, what the best thing to do is to find where you are on the where is best on the continuum that gives you, that gets you what you want. You maybe have to step forward to a level, and some people will have a tendency to go too far towards assertiveness or impatience or aggression or anger or pushiness. Some people will tend to go too far towards the patient side of things, and believing that they're just. I tend to do that, actually. Move towards the passive side, believing that that will create the space. That you let people get on with it, and then it'll resolve. But it doesn't always work like that. There's a happy medium, and so you have to be aware of where you are on whatever continuum it is. Patience, impatience, patience, aggression.
It's a moving target too.
Yep.
It's because what applies in one setting may not apply in the next setting.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we have to be aware, situationally aware. So I want to talk about the benefits of patience here first, because sometimes this will help you decide whether it's worth it. Because the patience comes at a cost, but this is what you get for it. This is the value. So we'll start with that. The first point is being patient can reduce your stress. Um, it can help people to slow down, stay calm in a stressful situation, and I think it's well documented by this point that stress is a killer, and stress is a career killer too. It's not just it hurts your health; it hurts your prospects for the future. And you bring it home, and there's all kinds of things about this. Sometimes just realizing I need to just accept what is happening here and just not make a thing out of it can reduce a lot of stress. Um, Now, that second point I just kind of alluded to, it improves your mental health. And I'm not just talking about when people are really close to a breakdown, but I mean, you want to be mentally healthy just like you want to be physically healthy. If you're running a low grade fever all the time, or you've got a cough that just won't go away, it's annoying. It gets in your way. The same thing happens with mental health. Um, if you can be more at peace, feel more relaxed, you'll be more emotionally resilient, and it won't things just won't hurt as much. They won't cause as many problems. Patience will help you make better decisions because in if you're patient, it gives you time to actually gather the facts, and then time to actually make rational decisions. Because if we only make decisions based on emotions, we're going to make mistakes. There's just no getting around it. And I realize we're talking to a pretty rational crowd here, uh, you scientists, but I also know how human you are. So we all have that some of the emotional part of it coming in. So we want to be aware of that and see the application because we care about making good decisions. I mean, it really does matter. Another thing that happens when you're patient is it improves relationships. People get along with you better. They like working with you better. you're somebody that's not constantly nitpicking and needling, other people will just enjoy working with you and will want you on their team. I mean, that's gratifying for you too. And again, it's a career building thing to build relationships because other people are going places. You can go with them, and you can take people with you too that are supportive of the things that you want to get done. So building relationships um, is definitely aided by being patient. Um, you're also helped in achieving goals, but because patience can help you overcome obstacles and it can help you build confidence. And that certainly is something necessary for career success and for career satisfaction. So if you like achieving goals, patience is a good tool. Um, Increased appreciation is an interesting one because I think that often gets overlooked. The longer it takes to get something, the the greater you appreciate it when you finally achieve it. So it's like time makes the heart grow fonder, as it were. So if you have to put in some effort and you gotta lay back and let some things play out to get what you want, when you get it, it feels better and it locks things in. So don't forget to be appreciative as things are going along. Then finally, I'll talk about strategic thinking. Patience can give you time to analyze the situation. It can see because that's the thing. You can be patient even though you're not happy about what's happening, just so you can take a breather, so you can step back and assess, and and it may allow you to see some possible solutions that might not have been directly obvious because you've had time to ponder things. It's just like the decision making part, but you know, strategic thinking is bigger picture. So these are some of the things you get out of patience. So if I started off making it sound like I was saying, "Oh, don't be patient," no, I'm not saying don't be patient. I'm saying be mindful about your patience, and when it's called for. I mean, look at all this good stuff. You want this, right?
Choose how patient you want to be.
Yeah, exactly. So let's look at the other side of that, the downsides of patience. Like, how can that be? Well, I happened to find a study that was uh, that was authored by Paolo Giuliano, and another Paulo Sapienza. Um, Giuliano is from UCLA. Sapienza is from Northwestern. These are good schools, right? And they started with a 2012 Gallup World Poll that was asking about this, about patience, and they found out something interesting. Um, the survey found that a moderate amount of patience will maximize life satisfaction and emotional well-being, but beyond that moderate level, higher levels of patience have a negative impact on well-being. And I'll have a note to the study in the show notes. But it, this is really making the point that I wanted to make here, that um, patience isn't the all-purpose tool. You can't use it for everything. Sometimes you need to not be patient because if you have an excessive delay in gratification, and we know that delaying gratification is a good thing. It's a maturation. If people don't delay gratification, they can get involved in all kinds of terrible things. Um, but there is a point where delaying your gratification, just keeping delaying it, it stops being beneficial. We need to win sometimes. Um, Competition in the workplace. I mean, it sometimes requires us to be more proactive. That is the point here, and this is true in a lab as well as any other kind of social setting. But um, it's still a business, as it were. There are objectives to be met, and people have to work together. And sometimes in working together, there's competition, and competition is useful. Um, So if we're always avoiding competition, we're we're costing ourselves. That is that is a setting where if we've just painted competition as automatically bad all the time, and I never want to compete, and I just want to get along with everybody. That's not how the world works, and it's not how your lab works. And you've got, I'm sure, in most labs, you've got some people with strong opinions, and which is good, but you need to be one of them. You need to pick your battles too, and you need to win some. It's not always so that you need to lay down and just let things happen. And the other thing too is that just out of self-respect, you want to be intellectually honest. If you see things going in a way where intellectual honesty is taking a hit, you got to stand up and say no. We're not going to pretend that that the data says otherwise. If it says what it says what it says. And be sure and take a stand for those things, and don't just be patient. Well, they'll catch up eventually. They'll start to understand. No, help them understand. Get in there, be a teacher, be a mentor, be a shepherd. Get them to the place they need to go. Um, that's that is when patience is no longer a virtue. So finally, you got to pick your moments now. It's like, how do I know? How do I know when to be patient, and when do I need to take a stand? Sometimes it just comes down to, I've I've earned some chips. I've got some I've I've got some political clout. I've got the opportunity now to cash in those chips. And sometimes you just do that. And the only choice there is like, well, is this the moment? Do I want to expend my political capital right now? When I say political, I don't mean this in a negative way at all. It's just, you know, it's about when you decide to take a stand for a certain policy, and do that. And if you've bothered to amass some authority in an area, um, don't just waste that. Use it when it makes sense. Now there are going to be times too when maybe you don't have the political capital, but you can see something is about to go disastrously wrong. I need to put my hand up and say, "Whoa, we have to stop here." And obviously that comes at a risk sometimes. Nobody likes to be the person who's always saying no. But sometimes, if other people aren't saying no and no needs to be said, you got to be the one. That is not a moment to be patient. Like, oh, well, I guess we'll just see what happens. Sometimes you got to stand up. Another thing that may happen is somebody's reputation on the line. Now, it could be your reputation, but it could also be someone else's, or it could be your group's reputation, your lab's reputation, your field's reputation. In moments like that, that is a time for you to no longer just be patient. You just don't let it wash over you, and let reputation be ruined, because it's really easy for a reputation to be lost, and it's really hard to get it back. So you got to be proactive about that. And then finally, if there's a setting where the mission is at risk, and whatever it is you're working on, what's got to be accomplished. So, I mean, are you putting your grant at risk, or is not? Are you putting it? Is the grant being put at risk? Do you need to speak up and point that out? Um, and that's just one potential mission. Obviously, we need to stay funded, but but two, you may really care about the things that you've bothered to get grants for. So, um, if you feel things are going the wrong way, get your ducks in a row, and then stand up for that. Don't patiently wait for everybody else to solve the problem, because we think that's being patient. Yeah, I'm being patient and waiting for somebody else to speak up. I'm being patient and waiting for the boss to take a stand. Like, you know, be your own person. Don't be afraid to take a position. Be you and obviously you need to pick the things that matter. Don't take weak positions on inconsequential things. Take strong positions on things that matter. And when you do that, you will find then when you're patient, people have more respect for that. Because when if they realize, you're the kind of person that would stand up if standing up was needed, um, then people start to trust you. They start to realize that you have leadership qualities and you're somebody they can follow. And even if it's just to follow you as a peer, that is that they can join you in your positions, or when you don't take a position, that's that is again a very good way to use patience properly and to avoid misusing it. So once again, I'll let you get a word in there, Nick.
Sure. I mean, I guess that one way to look at this is in any given situation is look at where's your natural tendency to go. Do you tend to be too
Yeah.
impatient, or do you tend towards the impatient side of things, or do you tend towards the patient side of things? And then if you're like me and you tend towards the patient side of things, and you're not saying something that you feel or not doing something that you feel needs to be done, the question to ask yourself is, are you being patient, or are you being fearful, or are you abdicating, or are you hoping that someone else will do what you want to do? And in which case then step forward towards the impatience or the assertiveness or whatever is at the other end of that spectrum for you. If you tend towards impatience, and then and you feel yourself going too far towards it, and all the downsides that happen at that end, then move back towards patience. But wherever you tend to go, I think Ken's overall message is that that there's downsides at each end of the spectrum, and so
imbalance is
you
always
don't want to
a
be
risky thing.
Yeah, you don't want to be either end of those. You want to be somewhere in the middle, and that's where the mindfulness comes in, is choosing that and asking yourself the question: is why am I standing at this point? Is it because I'm scared? The sort of the impatient side of the equation could be fear as well as the impatient. You could be scared to say something and be patient, disguise it as patience. You could be afraid of something not happening, and so that becomes an impatience, so that's where then fear maps onto that, or all sorts of other emotions and things. But that's taking that off in a different dynamic.
Yeah, and you can look at people that you know and love and respect. Some of them are very patient. Some of them are very impatient, and yet you still respect them. Why? Because the people that are properly impatient, they don't suffer fools. They know their space. They get it. And maybe the people that are really patient, you're like, my grandmother was really patient. She was not a highly educated woman, but gosh, she was a lovely woman. You know, and I will always remember that about her. But I've also worked with people that were brilliantly intelligent and were rarely patient, and I love that about them because they had such a steel trap mind. That you could follow them, you could trust they would be looking in the right direction, and you wanted to be a part of what they were doing.
Yeah.
So, and you may find too that with yourself, maybe you do have a tendency to one side of that spectrum or the other, but maybe you find that it's only in certain areas. Like I'm very patient with my kids, but I'm not so patient with my lab assistants. What's the difference? You got to look at it and go, well, does it make sense or not? Is it fair? Is it appropriate? And it may well be. I mean, you're dealing with a 6-year-old. It's a lot different than dealing with a 21-year-old post grad, right? But then again, too, it, if you're accustomed to coddling small children, do you then port that to coddling your college age uh, staff? Well, no, you don't want to do that. You got to do what's appropriate. But and also you don't want to bring it home. Like, look, I'm hard on these people. They're smart and they've already been through years of education. I don't want to take that to my third grader. Because that's not appropriate. But in the lab, obviously, you've got stuff you want to get done, and there are times when being patient will help you get it done. But there are times when not being patient is what's going to help you get it done. When you say, "Oh no, we're not going to drag this out. You're going to get this done. You're going to make this work," and you take a stand for that, and it's appropriate.
Yeah. That's one of the patience is one of the kind of again, I refer to the go back and look at the foundational 5, 6 first episodes of this podcast, and Ken talks about all sorts of different frameworks.
9.
Nine,
It's
okay,
9.
okay. I think I say a different number every time, but okay, there's 9 of them, but they're very good. If this is useful to you, go back and just listen to those again.
Yeah. So the first 3 are on human needs.
Mm.
The second 3 are on core mindsets.
Yeah.
And the final 3 are on charisma factors. So
Yeah.
just to clue you in on what that's about, and they really are useful, and we do reference them a lot. The concepts a lot, so it keeps applying.
Yeah, and so this is an expansion on one of those, one of the elements of that, which is patience, obviously, and when to wield it and when to not. So I think that was quite useful. It's takes a little bit to unpack, but and actually it looks quite obvious once you explain it. But unless it's explained, then you don't really you don't tend to take it into account. But hopefully, in whatever situation you guys are all working in or experiencing at the moment, you can see moments where you can see areas where where more patience would be a benefit, but also areas where patience would be is letting you down, and you maybe need to turn on the gas a little bit. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay.
All right. Well, that's what I had to say today,
Okay.
and thank you, Nick, for all your feedback in it.
Good, and thanks to the audience for listening in, and Ken for, as usual, some great insight. So as I've mentioned, if you've enjoyed this content, please go back, and if you've not done so already, and listen to those first 9 episodes that are packed with equally, if not more, useful wisdom, because these are really the foundations, those first 9. And of course, please tell your colleagues about this so that we can spread the word about the Happy Scientist and make more happy scientists. So you can look out for us again, appearing again on events.bitesizebio.com. The next one is scheduled in a couple of weeks. Until then, good luck in your research, and goodbye from all of us at Bitesize Bio.
The Happy Scientist is brought to you by Bitesize Bio, your mentor in the lab. Bitesize Bio features thousands of articles and webinars contributed by hundreds of PhD scientists and scientific companies who freely offer their hard-won wisdom and solutions to the Bitesize Bio community.